Hello and welcome. I'm Devika Diwan and you're watching me on NewsX. Today, we have with us Mr. Rick Sanchez. He's a veteran journalist and a political commentator. Thank you so much, firstly, for taking out the time and doing this with us. We're here with you in Moscow, so that's a pretty exciting city. But Mr. Sanchez, I want to focus a lot on India and America because that's what's making headlines globally as well. So I have to begin by asking you, what is your assessment of the Trump administration using tariffs as a foreign policy tool? And do you think that's setting a precedent?
Of course it is. And it's a precedent that will not wear well for the United States. Um, Trump has a tendency to have a negotiating style where he wants to Bigfoot you or Bigfoot whoever he's talking to. And at times, as a business person myself, I understand there are times when you need to deploy that particular strategy. But unfortunately, in the case of Mr. Trump, he uses it omnipresently. He uses it everywhere and always. And it's always the same strategy. And he doesn't necessarily change it for different parties. And this is what is so particularly insulting for India and for Mr. Modi, for example. The fact that he's using the very same thing on Mr. Modi that he did with Brazil, that he did with China, that he did with the EU. And after a while, you start feeling like this is not a special relationship that we have because you're treating me the same way that you've treated everyone else. It's especially galling, I think, in the case of India, because India has given the United States no reason to treat it that way. So the fact that he actually started doing that, stretching to the 50%, as he called it, simply because India was trying to do something that the United States should do. What India was doing and the response that India gave is, we will do what we need to do for the will of our people. Think about that. Think about Mr. Modi's response and what the response that I have gotten in my interviews that I've done with other Indian politicians and business people. We have so many people in our country who need a resource. We're going to get this resource because it's important for our people. We will do what's important for our people. I would argue, as an American, that one of the problems that I have with the leaders in my country, as much as I love my country, is they don't make decisions in America based on what's good for the will of the people. Too often they make decisions based on what's good for other countries or for other businesses or special interests, as is the case, for example, in Ukraine or has been the case in Gaza, where we're making decisions and doing things that don't affect America in a positive way. Mr. Modi was saying, I do what I do with Russia because it affects the Indian people in a positive way. It's pretty simple.
Right. But why do you think then the Trump administration really cornered India in a way? Brazil is a different story altogether. But as you said, that there was no reason that India gave to the United States of America to be cornered globally and for the kind of statements that were coming out of America at that point in time, saying that India is bankrolling Russia's war. That was pretty shocking to everyone in India when we heard that. So why do you think they chose that strategy? And do you feel that that policy is now changing?
The best part of your question is the word they, because you said they. And I'm trying to figure out, and so are you, by the way, who is this they? But there is a they. And the they are the interventionists, right? The they are the military industrialists. The they are the neocons. The they is the administrative state that still is running America, which we thought would not be the case in the case of Mr. Trump. We thought he was going to be much more transparent and would not allow those things to happen, but he hasn't. And unfortunately, in this particular case, I think it's the they who took over and got into his head. Somehow he has been convinced by others, I imagine, that he needs to take a tough stance in Ukraine and defy Russia, even though in his heart, I don't think he's anti-Russia. I think it's the opposite. I think his predecessor was very much anti-Russia, very pro-Ukraine. I don't think Mr. Trump cares about either side as much, and I think his leaning is more toward Russia. But the folks who are going to make a lot of money off of this war, the folks at companies like Raytheon, Dynamic, Pratt and Whitney, those big, giant, multi-billion dollar, if not trillion dollar corporations, are companies that have people who are getting into Mr. Trump's ear and telling him, you need to continue this war, you need to push Russia more, you need to be more aggressive. And in his desire to appear aggressive, he decided to stretch the envelope, if you will, and not just insult Mr. Putin and say he's going to sanction Putin. He's now saying, I'm not just going to do sanctions, I'm going to do secondary sanctions and secondary tariffs. I'm not just going to hurt you, I'm going to hurt anybody who becomes your friend. And that's what he was trying to do, and I think he was doing it based on the whispers of others.
Okay, so speaking of the war, then, do you think that that's the reason why the Russia-Ukraine war hasn't ended? You've just given me a glimpse into your thought process, but if you can elaborate on that further, do you think that that's why the war is just going on and on?
There's no reason in the world for this war to continue. It should have been over the first week Mr. Trump took office. If he had done what he promised he was going to do, it would have been over by now. But apparently he made that promise, and it was probably a false promise, because all he had to do was, as the president of the United States of America, the country that actually started this war, that provoked this war under the auspices of Mr. Obama and Mr. Biden, was that what my predecessors did was wrong, and I am going to undo it. As of right now, I am signing a piece of paper that Ukraine is not going to get one more penny from the United States of America, and I'm going to talk to my friends at NATO and make sure they don't give him money either. And as a result, I'm then going to sit down with Mr. Putin, and I'm going to tell Mr. Putin, look, they're going to stop fighting you because they've got no more money. So are you willing to sit down now and do a deal? And I guarantee you, Mr. Putin would have said, hallelujah, yes, I'll do the deal right now. Mr. Putin's already agreed like 3 or 4 times. I mean, they've had deals that they've had, and all of a sudden it wasn't Putin who backed out. Not that I'm here to defend Putin. I mean, he's a president, he's another politician. But history will show, the facts show, it wasn't Putin who backed out. It was the Brits who basically were sent as envoys from Washington to tell Mr. Zelensky, don't take any deals, don't stop this war, keep fighting. So, you asked me, why is this war continuing? It's continuing because there are people with interests who want the war to continue. And those interests have to do with things that have nothing to do with the will of the American people, the British people, the European people, the Ukrainian people, or the Russian people.
Okay, but do you really think that Russia was provoked into this war?
Absolutely 100%. Essentially what they were told, what NATO and what Victoria Nuland, representing the United States of America, did was they came into Ukraine and they changed the presidency of the country and said, we're going to remove a democratically elected president, and now we're going to start a coup, and we're going to start protests on the streets to make sure that there's enough appearance of resistance, and we're going to move in military hardware from NATO, and we're going to make sure that NATO is not only friendly with, that Ukraine is not only friendly with NATO. There's nothing wrong with Ukraine being friendly with NATO, nothing at all. But when they start making sure that Ukraine is angry and hateful toward Russia, in other words, we're going to make it so you're not allowed to have a relationship with Russia. You're talking about a country that Ukraine has had a 1,000-year relationship with. So saying that to them is seemingly foolhardy, both from a historical and from a practical perspective. And keep in mind, if you want to talk about provocations, that already Russia had embraced the West starting in 1991.
Yeah.
From 1991 on, Russia, even Putin, had said to the West, I want to be your friend. I want to join NATO. I want to be a part of your culture. I want to do all these things. And the West basically kicked them in the teeth and said, no. Not only that, I mean, again, just from a historical standpoint, you have to consider what happened after the unification of Germany, when at the time Mr. Gorbachev was told that we are not going to take advantage of you. All these countries that used to be friendly to you, they're going to continue to be friendly to you. And we're not going to take them over. We're not going to make them part of NATO. We're not going to expand NATO all the way to your border. What did they do? The opposite. They lied. So Mr. Putin is sitting here saying, well, if you lied about all these other countries And now you're about to take Ukraine, which is like our neighbor. It's been a part of our history. Everything that we are is there, and our people live there. Now you're going to come in and you're going to take over that too? No, I'm not going to let you do it. Please don't do that. And the Americans and the NATO forces basically said to Putin, we'll do whatever the hell we want to do. And that's why Mr. Putin went in. Am I saying that I agree with any kind of forceful military action? No. But sometimes you understand what a provocation is, and there's no doubt in my mind that that was a provocation.
Okay, interesting. But I also want to understand from you then, given the status quo of Russia taking over certain parts of Ukraine in the current war, I'm not going back to 2014. And they've also mentioned that that's now going to be a part of their territory, or they want to keep it occupied as part of a possible peace deal in the future.
The 4 oblasts, correct, which provinces, states, for the sake of viewers.
Yes, but I also feel that Ukraine may not agree to that condition. But if the US is able to convince Ukraine to give up portions of its territory, do you think that's setting a dangerous precedent?
That's a very good question. It never looks good for one country to go into another country and have territories. I think there's a difference in this case, though. And the difference is those 4 particular oblasts that you're talking about, some of which some people often refer to as the Donbass, the people who live there are Russian. They speak Russian. They practice their religion in Russian churches. They watch Russian television. They identify as Russians. They are culturally bound to Russia. And they felt that they were being put upon. I just spoke with a reporter, an American reporter who just came back from the Donbass, and I asked him what it was like. He said these people were being bombed. They were being hit with missiles. Children were being killed because the Ukrainians were angry at them that they had expressed a desire to be with Russia. So in many ways, the argument can fairly be made that what Russia did, and this is one of those words that's a loaded word, but did the Russians take over those 4 oblasts, or did they liberate those 4 oblasts? The Russians would argue they liberated the 4 oblasts. Perhaps I would leave it to maybe other people to go in there and ask the questions. My sense is that the Russians did not want to do that. They were very happy having their people, Russian people, living in Ukraine, insofar as Ukraine was a friendly country to them, peaceful with them, and the key word that Mr. Putin has used repeatedly is neutral. All we want is neutral. Be neutral. You don't have to love us, and you don't have to hate them. You don't have to hate us or love them. We just want you to be a neutral country. The Ukraine that was formed post 2014 was not neutral. It was going to be made in the hearts and minds of Western countries and run by the West.
Okay.
And I think those particular 4 oblasts, that's where it was very irritating to see your people living in those 4 oblasts from the Russian perspective all of a sudden be taken over by the West. Suddenly those people are going to be answering to Macron and Starmer and whoever happens to be the president of the United States. No. And I think that's what caused that. Does that answer your question?
Yes. But I also want to get your perspective on the recent drone incursions into Poland. Do you think that that was an accident, or do you somewhere feel that that was Russia testing waters? What's your assessment?
The jury's not in, but here's the question that we should ask ourselves if we're just regular thinking people. Russia is the biggest country in the world by far. It has more natural resources than any country in the world. Why in the world would Russia have any interest in taking any country in Europe where, unlike India, the GDP growth is tiny? There is no commercialism for the most part. They have huge immigration issues. They have a populace that is only approving of their leaders by something like 20%. They have high inflation. They have low wages. They have high taxes. I mean, I hate to say this to my friends who live in many of these European countries like, Germany and Denmark and the UK, etc., but they're no longer the important countries of the world. And if Russia were going to take over a country, it wouldn't be a country in Europe. They don't need it. What do they gain by having a new headache? Why would Putin want to take over a country where all he's going to have is more problems and more headaches when right now he has the biggest country in the world with more natural resources than any country in the world and great relationships with the countries that matter, which are the BRICS countries like India and China?
Okay, so that brings me to my next question then, since you brought BRICS and Russia's close relations with India, China, Brazil. Um, the recent SCO summit, India, China, Russia closing up at the summit, do you think that that sent some sort of a warning message to the US? And do you think that there was a definite change in the tone after the summit?
If it didn't send a message, they're either blind or stupid because my gosh, that was one heck of a message. And optics matter more today than they ever have before. And I think that Mr. Modi and I guess Mr. Putin and Mr. Xi, all three of them together, were very specific about their body language. I think if you look at that picture, and I hope you guys play it while I'm explaining this now, look at that picture once again. Look at what they're doing. Look at the deliberate attempt to hold hands, to seem engaging, almost like they're embracing each other, like they're the best of friends and always have been, which we know is not the case uh, with either of those three countries historically. But they were doing that because it wasn't only the language that was coming out of the summit, which was determinatively strong. It was also the optics that were coming out, and those optics were sending a very strong message that you mess with India, you're messing with Russia and China. You mess with China, you're messing with Russia and India. It's like we're together, we're the future, and we're going to be moving in this direction. And in many ways, the reason that we've been brought together is because of your consternation and the maltreatment that we've gotten from you. And I think that's a message they've wanted to send. Whether I agree with it wholeheartedly or not, I don't know, but I'm sure the message was received.
Okay, but do you think that because of the tariffs, and like we've discussed earlier, some of the negative commentary that was coming out of America, somewhere an ally like India was pushed towards America's adversaries, which a lot of people in the Trump administration claim are China and Russia. So why push India into that direction when we had really great ties?
Because some people in America, and especially in this administration, are not forward thinking enough to realize that that was what they were doing. You know, you have to know how to play chess. And when you play chess, you don't only know what your move is, you have to know what the next move is going to be from your opponent, and then what your move is going to be after your opponent. And then possibly even real forward thinking chess players know what the next two or three moves are going to be after your opponent does what you have to do and you have to do after what he does. So, long story short, I think the United States was a little short sighted in not realizing that the embracing arms of both the BRICS countries, but specifically Mr. Xi, when Mr. Xi turns to Mr. Modi at the summit and he says to him, "Don't you worry, and tell your business community that we've got whatever it is, 1 point so many billion people. We are going to buy your products. We are going to take care of whatever products you're not able to sell or maybe closed out in the United States. And we will work with Russia to make sure that you are, getting the oil that you need or the resources that you need." She publicly saying this and making sure that everybody heard it was also sending a message to Washington saying, "This is what you are not wanting? Fine, we'll take it." You know, the idea that your country and China are now going to open routes so that they can have airlines traveling back and forth once again, something we haven't seen in a long time. The idea that they actually sat down and talked about how they're going to find a solution to the problem in the Himalaya area with the border conflict or issues they've had there. Are they going to solve it? Probably not. This is an issue that goes back too far. But the fact that they're verbalizing, creating a solution to this, that's important language.
Okay, then, Mr. Sanchez, that brings me to my next question. I do want to understand from you. Um, is it somewhere, do you think, difficult for people in the American administration, be it under Mr. Trump or his predecessors, to somewhere digest the fact that America cannot continue to dictate terms?
Boy, that's a great question. You know what I think? I think one of the problems that we as Americans have is a lack of a cultural and historical appreciation for many of the countries in the world that were once put upon by the colonial empires. And we tend to think of them as smaller countries that don't have the wherewithal. And sure, we may know numbers like, oh my God, look, India has billion some people, and China has over a billion people, and ooh, India is really coming on. Look at their GDP is very strong. But what they don't understand about India is that India is a society that has been manifesting itself in many, many ways brilliantly for thousands of years. The history of India is not something which is small or should be taken as small by any measure. And as Americans, we have a certain ethnocentrism that I wish we wouldn't have, but it's been born into us, you know. USA, USA. We're the ones who go around making the rules. And I know it's been that way since the end of World War II, in many ways, because we did a wonderful thing by helping to defeat the Nazis. But I hasten to say that that is coming to an end. And it should come to an end based on not just the reality of it. We could talk TDP, we could talk, standing armies. We could look at all the numbers. By all measures, the countries that were at this summit that I was lucky enough to attend and cover, by all measure, those countries are much more powerful now than all of the countries in the West. They're just passing them, right? We know that. So now it's another thing that we have to acknowledge as well. Those countries didn't get there by accident. And those countries have their own history. And that history needs to be taken into account. The history of India didn't begin post-Modi. Post-Modi or during Modi. And it didn't also begin simply when India found its independence from the Brits, you know? India's story goes way beyond that, and it needs to be understood. Just like the history of China needs to be understood, and Russia. Most Americans don't know really who any of these people are who are a part of these civilizations. So I would argue that that's one of the reasons I think we as Americans sometimes haven't been educated enough to understand and appreciate these countries that are coming on now, and that's why we need to be their friends and find ways to make them part of our team.
So that's really nice for me to hear an American to accept that and spell it out so beautifully. But Mrs. Sanchez, I'm running out of time with you. I wish we could continue this conversation. How to put right time, yes. But I have to understand also from you. I want to understand your perspective on Europe and what do you think European countries are learning from the Russia-Ukraine war and some of the big holes as far as gaping holes in the NATO system that it's exposed, or in the larger concept of a global defense alliance, a global reliance on each other as far as economies are concerned. Because now we really see a lot of European countries wanting to develop their own defense and wanting to come back, to a better economic position.
Their people are very angry at them. You know that, right? Starmer has 23% approval rating. Macron has 29%. Merckx in Germany has 35%, and it's going down. All over Europe, people are screaming and saying, why are our wages so high? Why is our taxes so high? Why are our wages so low and why are our taxes so high? Why is inflation so high? Why is all of our money going to Ukraine and to Israel and to all of these other places? What about us? Why do we have suddenly immigrants from other countries all over the place here? I'm an immigrant. I have nothing wrong with immigrants, but if you have a community that all of a sudden changes completely overnight, I can understand why people in that community might be a little bit upset about stuff like that. So those are the things that are going on in those countries, and it's difficult for them. And yet somehow they keep picking and putting in leadership these institutionalized elites who come from banks and the finance world, and not people who can actually relate with the common man. And I think that's a huge, huge mistake that they're making. And I think they're realizing that the EU and NATO are very flawed organizations. We're starting to see a fractionalization inside Europe. We're starting to see Slovakia, Hungary, for example, pulling away and saying, we don't want to be a part of this anymore. We just saw at the cooperative summit um, in Shanghai Cooperative Summit, we saw Turkey asking for membership. Think about that for a minute. A European country is saying, I think I want to join the other team. Same thing with Fico from Slovakia, who went there and gave this magnificent speech. Just today, my friend Jeffrey Sachs, who I've interviewed in the past, just announced that in a conversation with Macron admitted to him that NATO was responsible for screwing up Ukraine, and NATO was responsible for starting the war in Ukraine.
Wow. Okay.
Macron said that, according to Mr. Sachs. Check me on it. Make sure. But that's fascinating. It's almost like they're doubling back, and you're starting to wonder how long this can continue. If they were smart, they would find a way to convince Mr. Zelensky, who they kind of own, to stop the war tomorrow. Stop. Putin will stop. You stop. Wherever it's at, we'll put the line right there. But my fear is, and I feel bad for Ukraine, and I feel bad for the Ukrainian people, because it's obviously a country whose destiny is not controlled by the people of the country. Yes, outsiders who are making determinations in this proxy war. And that's bad for the people of Ukraine. And I think if it continues and you give Russia no reason to stop, and you keep throwing ammunition and trying to kill them, they're probably going to have to respond in kind. And I fear that Ukraine is going to end up in a very terrible place as a result. That's why I would encourage the Europeans to try and find a solution, a real solution, not just by saying horrible things about Russia, to really sit down and try and find a negotiated settlement. I think the Russians want it. I think Putin wants it and needs it because his people want it. I'm not sure Zelensky is motivated to do that, because once that war is over, I don't think he's there anymore. He loses his power. So sometimes we have to look at those perspectives as well.
Okay, but unfortunately, again, the commentary coming out of Europe is all about, oh, we're closer to World War III than we've ever been. But because I'm running out of time, I have to get your perspective on the Israel-Hamas war as well. Why is that going on still?
I don't understand. I am perplexed by it. I've been talking to Israeli officials recently as I've been covering this story, and I have said to them, do you know what you're doing? I mean, do you know what the world is going to think of you for the next 50 years? Do you know what you're doing for my friends who are Jewish, who I love, who I grew up with? I'm from Miami. I just told one official 3 days ago, who's, a former IDF intel guy. And I said, I told him, I said, I probably know more Jews than you, and you're from Israel. Miami is like, there's so many Jews in America, and we're all friends and we're buddies. And I hate the fact that they're not feeling put upon, and Israelis are being put upon, who don't agree with what Mr. Netanyahu is doing. I mean, when the World Court, when the UN, when almost every legitimate organization in the world is saying that what you're doing is an extermination, a genocide, and you look and scoff and say, we're just going to keep doing it. When you scoff at the world, I just think it's going to be bad for them. I think eventually, if you believe in a higher power, which I do, I believe that the things you do, you will eventually pay for. And I think Israel is going to have to pay harshly for the horrible things it's doing to children. Even if you just look at the raw numbers, compare again, Ukraine, 13,000 civilians killed in Ukraine. It's been going on for 2.5, 3 years. The war in Gaza, a year, a little bit more? 80,000 or something like that? And who knows what they're going to find under the rubble? And the killing continues. 18,000 children, 6,000 under the age of 10. I mean, many of them with bullet wounds, which means they didn't happen by accident. They were shot. This is incomprehensible and unacceptable, and it has to stop. And I would encourage Mr. Netanyahu to look at himself in the mirror. He's not going to like what he sees, and he needs to stop this. It's wrong.
Okay. All right, Mrs. Sanchez, my last question to you. For the past 6 years, we've seen COVID-19, a global pandemic, and we've seen wars, we've seen economic instability, we've seen now tariff wars as well. What should the world learn from the past 6 years?
That is such a good question. It should learn that when all else fails, what everybody who has a position of power and is part of the international conversation, like you and I are right now, should never forget that there is nothing more important than the will of the people. And if you are looking out for your neighbor, if you care about what happens to your fellow man, you will make good decisions. And if you don't care about what's going on to your fellow man, if your interests are materialistic, if you're worried about how much money you're going to make, if you're worried only about the associations that you're going to have, you will make a bad world around you. And that bad world will spread to other communities, to other families, to other countries, and to the entire world. And I think if you go back and you look at the decisions that have been made that have gone in the wrong direction, wars, the pandemic decisions, et cetera, many of them went in the wrong direction when people started making decisions not for what is good for me and my family and my neighbor's family and my community and my city and my country. No, it's when they started thinking in terms of the corporations or the special interests or that type of material asset, which is another reason why I find, and, not to toot the horn, I find when I listen to Mr. Modi more often than not, and he's not perfect either, obviously, he makes mistakes. There's plenty of people, he gets a lot of criticism that I read in his own country. But I also know that when I listen to Mr. Modi, I get a sense that deep down, he really does care about the Indian people, and not as a slogan. I think he comes from it, and he identifies with it. I think you can almost say the same thing about Mr. Putin, that he really feels the heart of the Russian people and tries to do things to help them as well. And I don't feel like many of the leaders in the West think that way anymore. I had this conversation with Tucker Carlson not long ago, and we both came to the same conclusion that if America's leaders started worrying more about what Americans need, America would be viewed differently inside and outside of the country.
Well, Sanchez, thank you so much for that. That leaves us with a lot to think about as well. And thank you so much for joining us on NewsX.
You're so kind. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm honored that you would be interested in what I had to say.
Thank you.